All right, guys, I'm back. Here we go. Another Thursday. So, first things first, before our guest joins us, who will today be Kyle Matovcik, the uh the regular that I have come on all the time, just because I love talking to Kyle. He's an awesome guy. Um, so libertarianinstitute.org/donate. We are having our fund drive right now, so you can go give money to Libertarian Institute going through the libertarianinstitute.org/donate. We have all the information set up right up there as to our goals and how much we're looking to collect. So go to libertarianinstitute.org/donate and give us your money if you enjoy the podcast, if you enjoy all the writings and the books that come out from the libertarianinstitute.org. Go to libertarianinstitute.org/donate today. And our new affiliate, ALP. ALP. Where's my ALP at? Where's my ALP? I bet it's in my pocket. My ALP. Yep, my ALP. My ALP's right here. ALP. ALP, ALP, ALP. That's what you need. If you like nicotine pouches or you're looking to quit smoking, you got to go get you some ALP. In May of 2024, I quit smoking after 28 years of smoking. Was out of breath. I couldn't just go through normal routines and daily functions. So I quit smoking and I started using nicotine pouches just to curb that little bit of habit I still had. And I created a new habit, and that is nicotine pouches. So go get you some ALP and the use the link that's in the description. You get 10% off. Plus, if you purchase $70 or more of products from the Alp store, free shipping. So you can get, like me, 15 logs a month with no cost to shipping. Plus, you'll get 10% off. If you use the link in the description below, go to the Alp store, get you some Alp, try it out. I love the wintergreen flavor, but they have mint flavor and I think one other flavor. I'm not sure if it's like coffee or what it is, but they have three flavors there, 9, 6, or 3 milligrams of nicotine. Go to the Alp store because I know you're tired of smoking just like I was. So there you go. We'll be back in just a second. All right, here he is, Kyle Matovcik. Now that we got them ads out of the way, and me and Kyle have been bullshitting for the last 20 minutes, but y'all don't know that because you've been on pause, bitches.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's always good to talk to you, Tommy. I always enjoy having these conversations. And yeah, we were kind of talking about trying to talk about some of the things that we talk about to normies because, like you said, we sometimes it's easy for us to preach to the choir and assume that people have the same knowledge that we have, but it's not always the case. In fact, it's probably not the case at all for most normies, you know.
Yeah, well, I just gave my son, like before I came in here, I gave my son a 20-minute crash course on USAID and the CIA. So,
Mm.
I think he's out there listening to e Confessions of an Economic Hitman right now. So he was
Uh,
Yeah, so he was like, "Wait, what is this?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's pretty crazy
yeah.
shit, dude."
Mm. Yeah, digging in. You know, I kind of think about these things from time to time, and I don't know if I've really said it publicly, but I obviously everybody knows I'm having a kid, or at least people who follow me, and I'm gonna have a daughter, and I sometimes kind of like toss this around in my head, like, how do you go about these kind of things? Like, I know what I have to do is show up, be consistent, and be a good father figure to her. And we have a phenomenal network of people around us beyond just me, beyond just, our in-law or, my in-laws and my parents. Like, there's just a solid group of people all around me. So, like, when it comes to how I approach the boyfriend situation, it's like, okay, well, don't want her to know about politics. How is she supposed to feel? I don't want her to be a domineering bitch that just grinds her man down into the dirt. But, you know, I'm hoping to be the father that any daughter would want, and that she's going to compare any guy next to me and hopefully find a guy that matches up to her expectations, who she believes I am and who I hope to be, you know? So I
Right.
know it's like a long self-indulgent diatribe, but you get the point, I hope.
Yeah, all you can do with that is just set an example of by the way you treat her mother and by the way you
Yeah.
treat her, and don't and let her know that never to settle for anything less.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily raise her to be like some spoiled little bitch, but
Yeah.
because there is an understanding of pain, and that is something you will have to teach her through discipline throughout her life, and she'll understand that there are sacrifices to be made and this, that, and the other. But it also, there is a way to treat a woman, and there's a way to,
Yeah.
that she should expect her man to treat her. And that doesn't mean always giving her everything she wants, but it does mean
Mm.
being respectful and kind, generous and compassionate with her in those
Ye-
moments.
Yeah, so completely to that point, as soon as you said teach her pain, that really kind of struck a chord for me because my wife and I, and not to get like insanely personal, but I mean, our childhoods weren't perfect. And, I would wager that hers is probably better than mine, but there were still definitely like downsides to both, right? Like, my mom had went through a lot, my parents were split up. Her parents split up in, not perhaps the best way, but like we still have good relationships with our parents. But the hardships we both encountered, our daughter will never have to face. Like we're
Yeah.
going to make sure of that. And that is one thing that her and I have agreed upon, very, very thoroughly. And Sarah and I also agree that like the boundaries we set for our daughter, other people are going to have to respect no matter what, or else you will not see our daughter. And that sounds cruel, but like we're trying to make a good life for her. But to your point, how do you teach somebody pain when you don't want them to experience the same things that you experienced? All the while knowing those same experiences also shaped you into what I think most people would realize is a better person, right? Because
Mm,
we never look at the good times and think that's what defines us. We think about the bad times and how we overcame that. And that's ultimately what defines us as people. How do
right.
you give that to somebody when you want them to live a very prosperous life? Because I'm sure you know this much better than I do, but like
Mm,
there is a certain amount of struggle that creates something better.
mm.
What's that fine line? And I think that's probably what defines, a good parent is somebody that's able to walk that balance.
Well, right. And you have to let the children know that you have boundaries and not to cross those boundaries, right?
Yes.
So there was something that Jordan Peterson had said. I think it was in that book 12 Rules for Life, where
Sure.
he says, "Don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them." And that's
Yes.
like very important. Like you don't understand it's very easy to get to a point to where like you're irritated with your child and you dislike that child. If you set those boundaries clearly, never let them get to that region in which that begin to dislike them, even if it's in that like little moment.
Yeah.
You don't want the repercussions of what that could mean later on, right? because
Yeah.
because something scarring could happen in that moment. So you don't want to be in that position. And I thought that was really an interesting way to that he interesting thing that he put in that book. I've not read the whole book. I just remember hearing him talk about that. And I was like, that's so interesting that he thought to make that a rule for life. And I think it's very um pertinent to remember that. Don't If you set your boundaries so far away from what your boundaries actually are, you never let that child get close enough to those boundaries to make you dislike them, to make you like
Mm.
truly angry with them. And that I think that's super important.
Yeah, and I always thought that was interesting as well because it almost you're dependent upon another person. And over in like the more serious manosphere space that I kind of occupy, we talk about frame, which is basically it's not something that you can accurately describe without kind of understanding a lot of ancillary concepts. Basically, the idea that you're always your own mental point of origin. So, like when you think about decisions or things going on that are outside of your control or outside of your own life, you're always like your first consideration. So, like, okay, how is this job going to affect me in my life? But it's also through that understanding, that mental point of origin, that you also understand that like I'm only useful in any capacity when I prioritize my own needs and myself first. And this is going to be the way that I can also serve other people best is when I prioritize myself. But, also in that understanding, When you think about that specific rule of don't let your children do other things or things that make you dislike them, how do you instill that into another person? Because everybody knows you can't control other people. You know, you can if through absolute coercion or at the point of a gun, but like in a relationship that you want to, last a long time, how do you get somebody to cooperate with you without, being too heavy-handed or friendly? Like there's always that fine line because, as guys, we bust each other's balls, but it's pretty hard to go beyond another man's boundary. And if you do, then that's simply when you get into a physical
Yeah, I
altercation.
mean,
When it comes,
I have four boys. I call them fags all the time.
well, yeah, exactly. So, but like with a girl, that's completely different because, like, if my wife does something I dislike, the appropriate recourse is not to drop kick her through the wall. It's to, figure out how we resolve that through communication or through expressing a boundary in a way that's not physical. And, once again, kind of finding that balance and finding the way to do that um, isn't always easy.
Yeah, well, I'll be, it probably will come as no shock to you. I'm kind of old school when it comes to parenting. And so
Yeah.
peaceful parenting is not my deal. I don't think I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessarily the right thing. I think there's time
Mm.
to sit and talk with a child and
Yeah.
to have that conversation. But and not to say that I wouldn't do that, but there's also a time to spank a child too.
Mm.
Um, if my child is about to do something that could end his or her life or putting themselves in like extreme danger, like running out into the road,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm probably going to swat your butt because you know what? That does a lot less damage to you than running out in the road and getting hit by that car. And it
Yeah.
might stop the knowing that that is going to be a repercussion for running out into the road could
Mm.
stop you from running out in front of a car.
Yeah.
That memory of if I do this, dad's going to pop me on the butt. I don't want
Mm.
to do this. Yeah, that to me it's like there are degrees, right? Yeah, don't spank your child in anger, you know.
Yeah.
But but there's also attention that you have to pay to a child. I've told this story several times on the podcast, but most of my children I never had to discipline after the age of 9.
Mm.
Very much, if at all. It was very rare that after the age of 9, my children did anything to make me have to discipline them in any way, shape, or form. And that
Mm.
was correctly setting boundaries for the children. This is the way you act. This is
Right.
what is expected of you, right? And and you can go play, you can be a kid, you can be wild, you can go ride your bike, you can do all this stuff. But when an adult asks you to do something, do it. Say yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Be respectful, blah blah blah, and then and make the rules so easy to follow that you don't have to worry about them stepping outside of the boundaries, you
Mm.
know. And if you can instill that into them early, then that's the way they're going to live out their lives. That's the way that they interact with the world and engage with the world. And then you don't have to worry about a 13-year-old boy that you're having to bend over your knee and spank,
Mm.
because how ridiculous is it? Not only does it feel ridiculous to that 13-year-old boy, it'll feel ridiculous to you too. You're old enough to know better than to do this. Well, is he?
Mhm.
Did you teach him properly? Who's the failure here, the child or the parent? Once you get
Yeah.
to that age. Now, but that's not to say that that's always how you do it. Like Aiden, that boy, had me spank him 4 or 5 times a day, and it did not change a thing.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there and I'm just stressed out, because you're doing it. You don't want to spank your children. It's like,
Mm.
that's not fun unless you're some kind of psychotic, shitbag that should have been locked up years ago. But that's not how parents engage in their day. It's like most parents don't go to work and then get halfway home and say, "Oh, I can't wait to beat the shit out of this little fucker." Like
Yeah.
that's just not that's not how normal people interact with their children. Most people love their children and want what's best for their children. And sometimes they frustrate you and they get you to like frazzled and you don't know what you're supposed to do, you know?
Yeah.
But that's why you set these boundaries. And it's not always going to be perfect, and they're going to throw fits in the grocery store, and you're going to have to, take them to the bathroom and give them a little swat on their butt and tell them, you don't act like this in public. People don't want to
Mm.
see it. I don't want to see it. you know if I don't want to see it, then definitely people you don't know don't want to see it, and you talk to them about it. You're like, this is why we're going through this. But I couldn't. It didn't matter. I would pop Aiden on the butt. I'd sit him down. He'd be crying, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course you're sorry, but you keep doing the same thing over and over again. I'm not
Yeah.
getting anywhere with you. Now, is this a failure of the child or a failure of me? Obviously, it was a failure of me. So what did I have to
Mm.
do? I had to contemplate what's the best way to discipline Aiden. Spanking worked with all my other children, did not work with Aiden. It just, he did not respond to it. Like it, because spanking isn't about the physical punishment, right?
Mm.
Spanking is to let you know that in the occasion that you do something that it has put could potentially harm you, there
Yeah.
is going to be physical ramifications. Now, whether that physical ramification is coming from dad giving you a little pop on your butt or a car running you over, I'd rather it be from me. I'd rather you
Yeah.
say, okay, if I do this, it hurts a little bit. I'd rather it hurt a little bit than hurt a lot, or
Yeah.
or injure life. And so, but it didn't work with Aiden. There was no amount of it like that I could do to. So what I started doing is I started smoking him. Like when I was in the military, I put him in
Mm.
the electric chair. I put him in the push-up position.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he loved it, but he started acting right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember after like I started doing that. I was like, all right. I told my wife at the time, who was my second wife, I told her, I was like, okay, I'm gonna act like this. Oh, speaking of Aiden, he just texted me. He's like, I'm
I
gonna
was
call
like,
you.
it's,
Yeah,
I
that's
was
why
gonna
I
be like,
stopped.
Tommy,
I
all
was
right.
like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, why is Aiden popping up on my phone? And I'm like, oh, he's texting me. Okay, so like, yeah, I would do things. I would put him in like push-up position. I'd have him do push-ups. I put him in the electric chair up against a wall, 90-degree angle. I'd have him do overhand claps. I'd have him do jumping jacks. I'd have him do sit-ups. I would just smoke the shit out of him. And after like 6 months, he just stopped. Well, he stopped acting up like real quickly after that. It took like a month, and he just nothing. I didn't have to get on to him anymore. And then like
Yeah.
6 months later, he came up to me and he was like, "Dad, I never get to do exercise anymore." Or he said, "I never get to do PT anymore." It's
Mm.
like, yeah, because you're not doing anything wrong anymore.
Yeah.
And he kind of looked at me like, oh. And it was like you could see him figuring out, like, should I go do something wrong, or so I can do PT, or do I like not getting in trouble? And I was
Mm.
like, son, you don't have to get in trouble to do PT. You can do it anytime you want. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah. And so he would just start doing push-ups on his own and stuff like
Mm.
that, just out of nowhere. And I was like, that's fine. But it worked. It got him straight. So the disciplinary side of parenting is something you have to pay close attention to, and you have to work out, you know. But
Yeah.
there was never a time where I would spank one of my children, or they would get in trouble with me, where I wouldn't sit down with them and talk to them about why. This is why you got a spanking, or this is why you're going to get a spanking. Like, have that
Mm.
conversation and treat them like an adult, like not like an adult, but like a human being, and expect them to have rationality to understand what you were saying
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth on this because like the Stefan Molyneux types who are about peaceful parenting, I think people paint this a little too grimly, as in like if you so much as yell at your kid once, then like you're completely damaging them, and that to me just seems a little hyperbolic. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
and the other thing that I was kind of thinking of when you were mentioning how you people kind of look at their kids is that like I think when they go to spank their kids, let's say out of anger, it's because like, okay, well, right now there's a lot of chaos in your immediate vicinity right now, right? Like you're
Mm.
frustrated, you can't think far ahead into the future and think of how to, how this whole situation is going to play out. and you know that if you are to spank your kid, then it's going to potentially and more than likely actually solve the problem, at least for now. So you resort to that. But most people aren't sitting there looking at their kid, like you said, and just thinking, oh man, I can't wait to crack this little fucker right upside the ass or something like that. Like people just, it's in the moment and you get frustrated, and that frustration may be taken out on the child in a way. But it sounds like by the way you're describing it, you did it more calculated, and I'm sure there was probably times, amongst every single parent on the face of the planet that like there were times where it's like, no, I shouldn't have did that. But probably more often than not, people try to be calculated about it and like, okay, well, we're going to do this. There's a physical ramification for something you just did, but I'm going to sit down and we're going to talk this through, and I want you to understand why this happened, so that
Mm,
way we can not do it again.
right. Right. Yeah. You definitely want to communicate with the child. You can't just, you can't just, you can't just smack them around or just have them like grounded to their room,
Yeah.
permanently without some sort of like conversation as to this is why you're in trouble. This is what you did. And
Mm,
this is like, this doesn't work. We're going to have to make some changes here to your behavior. But the parent has to, there has to be an understanding from the parent side that some of the child's behavior is due to your behavior, whether it's
mhm.
sometimes it's your lack of consistency, right? Because if sometimes you let them get away with jumping on the bed and sometimes you don't, the kid doesn't know what the hell they're supposed to be doing. So
Yeah.
you got to be consistent. You got to lay out these rules. These are our boundaries. This is as far as we're going to go. And then you just got to stay within that parameter, or if the mom doesn't let him jump on the bed because women don't like the danger as much as men, but the dad's like, I don't give a shit. Go jump on your bed. Who
Mhm.
gives a fuck? You know, that's why we bought it. You can sleep on the floor, jump on your bed, like whatever, you know,
Yeah.
which would be such a dad thing to say. Then you're not on the same page. You're not setting like clear boundaries for that child
Yeah.
until they're at an age to where they can understand, right? Like, so I guess when my kids were about, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, maybe 14, I quit caring if they cussed. But what I
Mm.
always told them was don't cuss in front of your mother, don't cuss in front of your grandparents, and don't cuss at church or
Mhm.
school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so these four places. No, don't cuss at school, don't cuss at church, don't cuss in front of your grandparents, don't cuss in front of your mom. I don't care what the fuck you say around me, you know?
Yeah.
And but they're at an age of understanding where they can differentiate the situations,
Right. They have
you know?
autonomy to a degree. And I think that's
I would
where
never tell a 5-year-old that.
yeah. Right, right. And I think that's this kind of goes against like the leftist worldview. And I was thinking about this earlier when you mentioned how your son Aiden wasn't very receptive to spanking. So like, the leftist worldview typically is that, we're all kind of blank slates, right?
Mm.
But I mean, even right there amongst your five kids, there's one that is distinctly different than the other, right? Where, like even between me and my four siblings, I'm sure my dad would say there were all uniquely stressful things or uniquely good things about all of us.
Right.
All right. But, kids are going to have a little bit of their mother, a little bit of their father in them, and they're going to probably absorb different things from every single one. Like I keep saying, or Sarah and I keep talking because like when I was younger, I had this real long, thick, curly hair, right? And Sarah's hair is, thick and not quite as curly as mine, but it's definitely like wavier. And I'm like, man, our daughter's gonna have either like really, really fucked up hair or, hell, it could be like dead straight. Like my mom's hair is super straight, my brother's hair is wavy, my dad's big, thick, and curly. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, yeah, what the hell's my daughter gonna look like? Like, is she gonna have long, brown, thick, curly hair like my wife and I? I don't know, but hopefully it's not that bad for her. But there's going to be unique challenges for every single child, and I think that's kind of the beauty of raising kids is that like you never know what you're going to get, and it also tests everybody in the situation because, like you said, um, each child is going to respond differently to different things, and then you found certain things that worked for one kid versus didn't work for the other. So um And the other thing is that also, your kid is going to reflect things that you allow. And this is something that I think about quite a bit as well. It's like, okay, well, what's the joke? Go ask your mom. Well, my mom said, go ask you. So, I think about that over here and there. I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably going to be the final authority in a lot of these situations because obviously I'm a lot more intimidating than my wife. So someone's
Right.
going to have to kind of drop the hammer when absolutely necessary. And hopefully it's not very much. But like, these are conversations that you kind of have to work through as a whole family, not just as a father, not just as a mother, not just as a daughter, but as a whole family unit. Like, how are you going to organize authority? And how are you going to proceed through things that may seem difficult at this time? Like there's so many different things that just you have to work through as a person in this situation. And I don't know, man. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited and I think it's time.
Well, you're starting off on easy mode too, because girls are actually easier than boys.
Okay.
They're more expensive, but they're easier.
Sure.
Like I don't maybe I can't remember
Mm,
ever having to really discipline my daughter.
mm.
Maybe once or twice, maybe, but
Yeah.
with her, usually I'd just say hey and I'd look at her and she'd stop and start crying. And that was it. It was just
Yeah.
they're so much more sensitive. They're not as wild. Boys are wild. So
Mhm.
boys are just they're barbarians. They're little freaking miniature barbarians.
I know how I was. My
Yeah.
dad, my
And
dad and I always told me that he's like, man, I'd walk into the living room and you and your brother would be driving elbows on each other off the
yeah,
couch.
yeah. I remember one time Talon, my son that's here right now,
Yeah.
we lived in an apartment and I was home with them. I don't remember what Anna was doing. But I was home. It was just me, Talon, and Aiden, and they're jumping off the back of the couch because the way the apartment was set up, you had a bar here, and then the hallway went like that, and we had a couch here facing the television up against this
Yeah.
wall back over here, and so I'm laying in like the little hallway area, and they're getting on the back of the couch, jumping off of it, elbowing me, like you said, or landing with both their knees on me or whatever. And we're just wrestling around. And I don't remember how old they were. I think what was I don't know. This was in 2010, I guess. So Talon is 21 now. So you can do the math. He was like 6, something like that at the time.
Yeah.
And he jumps off that couch and he landed on my head with his
Oh.
elbow just right on my head. It it hurt a little bit, but I've been hitting the head a lot, so I'm kind of used to it. And so I just kind of but I just laid there, and I just didn't move. I just laid there. And he his brother kicked me and I didn't move. And then something else happened and I didn't move and Talon goes, "Dad? Dad?" Daddy! And he just started crying. He just wailing. He thought he
Yeah.
had really hurt me. And I was like, I'm cool. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. You know, but yeah, no, boys are a lot of fun, but they're really wild and they're
Uh,
into shit constantly. Whereas girls are a little bit easier. Like I said, it's like easy mode. Like you're not gonna have to worry about as much stuff. You know, she might still be a tomboy, but she's still never going to be as like maniacal as a little boy. Like it's just not going to happen. Like little boys are little heathens and they should all be strung up for the first 10 years of their life.
Mm. Yeah, and well, the other thing
You
is that I
should
was thinking
sleep
about
in a
it.
kennel every night.
I was like, my wife gets to have the birds and the bees talk with her because like all I got to do is be like, yeah, if he's like a drug dealer, yeah, no, 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 and like just know your dad will Hulk out on a motherfucker. You will see dad chimp out if shit gets bad enough, but I trust you well enough not to do those things. But this also gets to like another conversation. A lot of people, when it comes to Elon Musk, people on both sides of the spectrum look at whatever kid it was that ended up transing themselves. Um, everyone's like, oh, well, he's such a shit father that, his kid did this. Or the other side will say, like, oh, um, the unanimous they transed his kid. And like, I think about what you were saying there earlier, where like, if you look at the behaviors of a kid, then it is ultimately, not ultimately, but like, it can be a reflection on you as a parent. And I kind of think about a situation like that, and I think it's tragic all the way around. And obviously, we recognize that adults have autonomy, but like, I do have to think that like if a father was around more, than their daughter, their son wouldn't want to be in that situation because, in my mind, and obviously you can't control another person, but like you would let them know that they're loved enough the way they are, that they don't need to change a thing. But once again, once they're an adult, there's outside influences on them and you can't control exactly how they feel after a certain point.
Yeah, well, I can't put myself in Elon Musk's shoes, right?
Of
Because,
course.
there was a essay written like a long time ago, and Father Stephen DeYoung always refers to it, and it's like you'll never know what it feels like to be a bat. Like
Mm,
you don't have the capability, you don't have the experience to
yeah.
understand what it's like to be a bat. I don't know all the circumstances that went into Elon Musk's kid being trans, whether they
Yeah.
did it, Elon did it, Elon's wife or ex-wife, or was, I don't even know if Elon was still with the mother. I don't know how often Elon saw the kid. I don't know any of
Yeah.
these things. Elon absolutely, no matter what you want to say about the man, he works constantly. Like,
Yeah.
what kind of relationship did he have with the children? These types of things. Um, as a father who did miss a long lot of time with my kids due to work because I was driving over the road for, a long time, while my kids were growing up due to circumstances. And it, in my mind at the time, and maybe I would still look at it the same way if I were in that situation again. Maybe I would look at it different. Hindsight being 2020, maybe I could work
Yeah.
something else out. But I knew at that moment that, okay, now I have child support not only on 3 kids, I have child support on 5 kids. I'm going through my
Mm,
second divorce. I'm paying $3,000 a month. Where am I? How am I supposed to live? Like, how am
yeah.
I supposed to afford rent? How am I supposed to do these things? And so I made a judgment call with the resources I had available to me, which was I'll go drive over the road. I'll be gone for 2 or 3 months at a time, and I'll come home and I'll spend a week, a solid week with my kids every time I come
Mm,
home.
yeah.
And that to me was the best case scenario that I could think of at the moment. Maybe if I sat down and I really considered it and thought about it, I can look at circumstances and say, oh, I could have done this or I could have done that. Possibly. It's very possible. I don't really dwell on regret that much. I don't really
Yeah.
think that deeply about those things, that what ifs I don't get into. I'm just like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, what if a frog had wings and it wouldn't bump its butt on the ground when it hopped? Is what my dad used to
Yeah.
always tell me. So the what ifs don't matter to me. Um,
Mm,
so um, all I can say is I've heard from a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, talking about raising children. The most important thing you can do is eat dinner together every night,
mm, mm,
because that is, and if you make it a rule, no electronics at the table.
yeah.
Like, we go sit at this dinner table, it's the family time. This is when we're spending our time together. Eat
Yeah.
dinner together. After dinner, I mean, I know y'all aren't like religious in any way, but play board game afterwards or something like that, and expand that time. Make it a habit. That's what we do. This is our
Mm,
family time. This is what we do. We're not going to miss this.
yeah.
And I know with Sarah being a nurse, those shifts are crazy. My grandma was a ER nurse. I completely understand. There may be times where it will just be you and the daughter, or there may be
Mm,
times where it's just her and the daughter because you have a show you're playing that night. But
yeah.
always have that family time. There's always that time. It's always the daughter with at least one of the parents eating dinner every
Mm,
night together, no electronics, talking, communicating, enjoying each other's company, you know. And
Mm.
that, I remember when I heard we were talking about listening to some of the shows we listened to, and I brought up Megan Kelly, and I she was telling a story a while back. They had moved from New York because she grew up in New York City. They moved from New York to Connecticut because of the rules of the school district that they were in New York City, in the New York laws about this exact subject, about the teachers keeping secrets from the parents, not being open and
Mm.
honest with the parents. And she said when they got to their new school, which is a private school in Connecticut, the teacher had brought brought something up in class about her daughter being trans or something like that. But she said,
Yeah.
I've built a close enough relationship with my daughter that when my daughter got home from school, she told me this happened.
Yeah.
And so we were able to talk about it right there on the spot. If
Mm.
you don't want your children being in a bad situation where other adults are influencing them in a negative light, then don't be absent from that child's life.
Mm.
And you can be at home and still be absent.
Hmm.
You see?
Yeah.
And so that teaching that child from a very young age that we communicate is very necessary. So that
Right.
even like because boys always go through the phase of independence where they're rebelling against their parents in their teenage
Yeah.
years. It's inevitable. It happens. But I always knew, no matter how I was acting and what I was doing, I always knew that there was an option for me to go talk to my mom or my dad. That it was
Mm.
always there on the table because
Right.
my mom always says we raised each other because we've always been very close. She had me when
Yeah.
she was 17, so she's always like, yeah, we raised each other.
Mhm.
And so I always knew that option was available. I didn't always utilize that resource, but part of that is just my personality too, because I do have especially when I was younger, I was much more of an introvert when I was younger, and so I didn't always verbalize and vocalize as necessary as required to maintain uh, my my relationships properly, which is why I've been through two divorces. There was like a lot of failure on my end in maturing and learning how to communicate properly on my end, being emotionally mature on my end, that a
Mhm.
lot of growing up I had to do, but a lot of that was uh, a lot of that was stuff I had to work on my end. Not to say that other people were perfect in the situation. Obviously,
Yeah.
takes two to tango, but I I choose to, when you look at a situation like that, always be looking at what can I do to to make myself better, to prevent this, to it's because it's on, like, ultimately the responsibility is on you as the parent. So
Yeah.
you want to create an environment where these negative influences in your child's life coming from other adults isn't necessarily even an option, because your child trusts you and you trust your child to an extent that it doesn't happen. And so I was going somewhere. Oh, a lot of people, when the schools became public, both parents started having to work, right?
Yeah.
And this happened mainly uh severely in my generation, Gen X. That's why, where the term latchkey kid came from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the Gen X generation grew up in an environment where both parents were working, and
Right.
we were going to daycare, we were going to school, we were back at daycare. We were being influenced by lots of adults in our lives that were not our parents. And
Right.
after a full day work, it takes a lot. It's a lot for a parent to go pick up the child from daycare, get back home, if you have two or three kids, spend sufficient time with both children while cooking dinner, cleaning the house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there has to be that. It's like that I think it was Dave Ramsey I heard, where he talks about paying yourself before you pay your bills. Always pay
Yeah.
yourself first. Like, pay yourself as if you're paying a bill. And
Mm.
it's that type of, you're going to have to let some things fall to the wayside and come back and solve that problem later. You know,
Hmm.
if your floor needs to be mopped, it can wait a day because it's much more important for you to spend that time with your child.
Mm,
You know,
right. Yeah, there was something right on the tip of my tongue. Oh man, I got so much going. But um, I was where the fuck was I gonna go with that? Oh man, I completely lost it. But yeah, I like that idea of paying yourself and kind of stuff like that because, like you said, it definitely is possible. And I think this is a very subtle thing that you said is that like it's possible to be absent and still be at home. Like you could be present but not present. Like you can not engage. And I think we're all guilty of it, especially with our fucking phones and everything. Um,
mm-hmm.
my wife and I both do it. Everybody could be better about it, but we go out to eat or something like that, and then you're on your phone right in front of somebody else.
Right.
Or like, when you go out to a concert or something like that, you want to do this. Like I try not to do it. Usually, like I'll check Twitter or something like that, or message somebody back if they need it. I'll take one picture at almost every single show I go to, just to remember it by, and then that's it. Like I see other people that just take like these long videos of concerts and stuff like that. I'm like, man, I went to a piano bar once for a guy when I played in a death metal band called Wretched Hive. It was like Death Groove, and the bass player that was playing with us at the time, we went to a place called Sing Sing. It was like a piano bar where they would have people, you throw 'em money or something like that, and they'll play a song. And my buddy Greg, who's playing bass for us at the time, wanted to go there, and I was on my phone there, and the guy on stage had said, "Put your phone away. Life's right in front of you." And I always think about that, and I'm like, man, like if it's so frustrating because like you realize you're doing it, and it's like, oh shit. Like I feel like a bad person when shit like that happens. But you just got to take the time to be present in the moment. Man, there was something I really wanted to fucking bring up, and it just completely left my fucking mind. Motherfucker.
That is one thing that drives me crazy
Mhm.
is I went to Beatrix and I had gone and seen oh, who was it? It was Devil Driver. Oh, I can't remember the other band they were playing with. Anyway, we went to this Devil Driver show. Jonathan Miller, the bass player for Devil Driver, and Beatrix are pretty good friends, and so he invited us, gave us VIP tickets, and got us in the show. And so we drove to Houston for the show, and I remember like looking around, and like where there's normally a pit,
Mhm.
everybody was just standing there recording the show on their phone. And I was like, dude, you're wasting the best parts of your life
Yeah.
looking at a screen,
Hmm.
you know?
You, I'll never forget the feeling of 15 years old. First concert I ever went to at not PVG Paints Arena. It used to be called the Pittsburgh Station Square Amphitheater. It doesn't exist anymore. It's like a soccer field now. I remember walking around the corner to go into the venue and just being like, the first time you ever feel a band playing, it is just like life changing. Like
Mm.
it is electrifying. And then when Guar went up, I'll never forget everybody gets shoved forward because everybody wants to get all the fake blood on them. And I remember just getting my nose right into somebody's back. It hurt so fucking bad.
Oh, we lost audio. I think this is a connection issue. Yeah,
We
I'm
square.
there we go. I can hear you
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So you got shoved, your nose went right into somebody's back was the last thing I heard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I could still almost feel the pain in my temple just like thinking about it. So yeah, it's just shit like that. You never forget. And then like all the smells, even like the awful smells, the sound, the tone, you can't forget shit like that. And like I said, it's cool to have a video, but to just live through this little 6-inch screen when you're watching a concert, that's not the way to fucking do it, man. And like,
Right.
This is another thing I think about. I'm going to be able to take my daughter one day to go see me perform. She'll maybe get to see some bands that she likes. Somebody made a joke at me the one day saying like, "Oh, I'm going to raise the next Lita Ford or something like that." I'm like, "Oh, that's not entirely out of the realm of possibility." But you know, um, it's
Worse things could
interesting.
happen.
Yeah, right, right. My wife, when she was growing up, she played a lot of sports, and like obviously I'm into health and fitness, and obviously I play music as well. But like I think about this kind of stuff. I'm like, what's hopefully she picks up some of this stuff because like no one else in my family ever really played sports or played music or anything like that. I don't think anybody in Sarah's family did. I know, once again, she grew up playing sports, softball, basketball, and I did track and field briefly, but um, to think about that kind of stuff that's going to be available to her, I hope she takes it because, like, man, that shit's cool. I hope she turns out to be talented. I hope she decides to pick up an instrument or something like that. But how do you like encourage them into that without making them absolutely repulsed by it? Because there is a certain point where, yeah, I think everybody's experienced this where your parents really want you to do something, and eventually they do it just enough, and you're like, fuck it, I don't want to fucking do it anymore.
Mm,
And I seen that with my younger brother, who my dad really wanted him to play guitar as well, and he picked it up. He took lessons. He started getting okay at it, and then he just lost interest.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the early years, you just got to let them be kids, man. I,
yeah,
I see all these parents that run around and it's like, we're going to this soccer game and then this and that. And if the kid wants to play sports and they want to get involved in, organized sports, that's fine. But what if they don't? What if they're
yeah,
not good at it? What if they don't enjoy it? You know?
yeah.
I my Talon when he was young, he played t-ball, and the boy couldn't run to save his life. I mean,
Yeah.
he tried, but he couldn't run to save his life. But I figured out after a while he enjoyed playing t-ball not because he wanted to go play t-ball. He
Mm.
enjoyed t-ball because I would bring him outside and teach him how to play. He wanted to play ball with me. He didn't care about
Mm.
going and playing in the game, you
Yeah.
know? He and so sometimes that's all it's about is I remember growing up, so we had a community center nearby. It was a rec center, a recreation center nearby where we lived in when we lived in Dallas. And I was like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10. And I was on the basketball team for the rec center. And yeah, there's some cool experiences there. And I was decent. I was really good defensively, wasn't great offensively, and I was a good free throw shooter. That was pretty much my bread and butter was free throw shooting and playing defense. And but I got good at that because my dad's 6'4", went played college basketball at McNeese in Lake Charles, and I had to learn how to defend him.
Mm.
So that's what made me good at doing those things. And I remember I have more memories about going out to the football field and running routes on the football field out behind the rec center and my dad throwing the ball
Mm.
to me than I do ever about playing any organized sport, you
Mm.
know? So
Yeah.
because we were making memories, we were spending time together, we were hanging out, especially like in my situation, my dad worked multiple full-time jobs. He was working
Yeah.
construction and working retail. So so having those opportunities to go out and do those things, that's what was important, is spending time with my dad, going and playing basketball, going and throwing the football, you know, um, playing pickup games 2-on-2 with me and my dad against these two like teenage boys, you know,
Mm.
and diving out of bounds to save the ball, tossing it back into him so he can get a layup. And when I hit the ground, I stand up and there's a spark plug sticking out of my arm, and shit like that. Those are the things I
Mm.
remember, you know, and so yeah. And I don't even know if we won that game, but I remember that moment. So it's just those are the times that your daughter's going to remember, and that's what you have to remember. It's not necessarily about the competition for a child really doesn't start mattering until they start getting closer to puberty. What
Yeah.
you really want is them to learn the love of the game. And where do they learn the love of the game? Is they learn it from participating with you or from participating with your wife. And that's
Mm.
not just the sports, that's music, that's this, that's that, and the other. You know, it's if your daughter comes into your guitar room there while you're podcasting and starts like messing around on one of your guitars, don't sit there and give her a lesson. Pull her up in your lap, lay the guitar across her lap, and let her just play around. You know,
Mm.
that's where you learn to love these things. It's because now that guitar isn't dad going, no, that's not the way you play an E. This is the way you play an E. You have to bend your finger like this. You have to hold the pick like that. And that's disciplinary. Whereas otherwise, if you just pull her up in your lap and let her sit there and just jam around on the guitar and play around, now it's fun. Now it's an experience. This is how we used to spend time together. So now I look at this guitar, I see something loving that I want to spend time with, something I really enjoy, not something that I have to do. That's a chore.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember my dad telling me about this with my younger brother, where they put him into wrestling, and he was like, "These parents are screaming at their kids. Their kids are crying while they're wrestling." And I mean, they were probably like under 10 years old, and I'm like, and
Mm.
once again, this isn't for me to say. I'm not the parents in this situation, but like, if they don't love it while they're doing it, should you keep pushing them to do it? And I think that's kind of what you're getting at there, is that like, I don't want my daughter to come in here and grab this guitar right here, even though I'm selling it. And feel like she's being scowled because she touched dad's instrument when she wasn't supposed to. I want it to be, oh, no, no, no. If you want to do that, then like you said, it's an experience. Let's sit down, try to, if you want, dick around with it. If you just want to beat on the strings, go ahead, beat on the strings. Don't scratch it, but, go ahead, play it, enjoy it. And then, when you want to go do something else, hey, dad will be here. Dad will walk upstairs with you. Whatever you want to do, I'm here, but I don't want to twist your arm and make you do anything that you don't want to do. But yeah, like when I hear about things like that, where it's just like kids don't seem like they're enjoying it, like, just, I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, every parent wants their child to be successful, right?
Yeah.
And if uh like I'll put myself out to blast here because I remember this like clear as day. And then the shame I felt afterwards because I was like, why did I act like that? There
Yeah.
was one time we were at one of Talon's T-ball games. It was his last year in T-ball. He was going to go into baseball the next year. And he hit the ball and then he didn't even run like to first base. He just kind of like
Yeah.
shuffled. And he was, like I said, he wasn't good at running anyway. Like when he ran, it was looked like somebody was in slow motion. He was just terrible at running.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like shuffling over to first base. And I'm like, I wonder why he's moving that way. And then he turns and he's dead sprinting back to the dugout after getting thrown out. And he's crying
Yeah.
that he got thrown out. And I was like, dude, why can you run to the dugout, but you couldn't run to first base? You're crying because you got thrown out. You should have ran, and
Mm.
it, but I felt bad because I was like, I shouldn't have yelled at him about it, you know,
Yeah.
because it's just like I know what your potential is. I can tell if you're trying or not trying, and you're
Yeah.
you're wasting people's time. If you don't want
Mm.
to play, if you don't want to be involved, then just sit on the bench and tell your coach, I don't want to play today. Like
Yeah.
quit wasting time.
We all,
And
yeah, and we all have days like that. And funny enough, my Sunday coffee podcast I did on this, like I called it "Why Care." You could see people who give a shit about their craft, right? Like when
mm,
you watch a band playing live, you could tell people are just phoning in, and you could tell people who are like sincerely into it. You cannot watch. I don't give a fuck who you are. You can't watch Pantera in Russia in 1991 at Monsters of Rock and tell me those motherfuckers don't care. That is
yeah,
to this day probably one of the most like undeniably awesome, if not like the best concert performance in history, right? Like,
Dude,
or you
yeah.
can't watch like some of those bands
I get
back in the
goosebumps.
60s
I
or something
get
like that.
goosebumps. You just saying it. I get goosebumps. I'm
Exactly.
thinking
And
about
yeah.
Domination was just, oh my God.
Exactly. Right. You can't tell me they didn't give a shit. Now, you could probably watch some other bands where they have like backing tracks and all this other stuff. I've seen bands like that where it's like your whole set is like manufactured. Like
Mm,
when we play, Matt, my drummer, and then myself, we do all the backup vocals for Jen, and it's not going to sound like a common crown on the CD. But you know what? I've learned to sing along with Jen because we've played together now for six, almost 7 years now. And I know where to go, and she sings where she sings. And like, we're going to do a cover of Firewoman when we play this big bike rally. Later on in the summer, and like we were trying to get the vocals right for the chorus fire, and like
hmm
I couldn't get like the lower part. So
hmm
she's like, okay, well, what if I go do the mid-range part, then you and Matt do the higher part? And then we did that one run through, and she's like, oh, that's perfect. Like we all sound good doing it like that. So
Yeah.
it's just things like that where like everybody has their own pocket. And once again, you know, people who sincerely give a shit. And like my dad commented on it, and it's like, when I worked for my dad, he explained me kind of the love of the craft, right? Like when you're fixing a car, what the difference is between somebody doing it to get paid and somebody that just like sincerely like wants to do a good job. Right. He's like, yeah, when we change oil, we wipe the oil off the drain plug, we spray it down, make sure everything's clean, we check the tire pressures. An oil change here isn't just you drain the oil, you put the filter, or you put a new filter on, you top the oil off, you send them on their way. Like, no, we give a good look over the car. And like, my dad doesn't pay his employee flat rate anymore, which every other automotive shop that I know of, except for maybe like one, they pay their guys flat rate. So it's like by the job, by what it's quoted, you get paid for that. My
hmm
dad doesn't pay his guy like that anymore. She's like, I didn't want to have those fights. Like, oh, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not getting paid for that. Like, I want you to do a good job. So, um, when you do an oil change, he was telling me this last week. He's like, all right, so I don't talk to like most of my customers anymore. He's like, I see them every here and there. They drop their cars off, but they know that I'm going to take care of it. They leave them a big old envelope of cash or whatever, when they come to get their car, they give them
hmm
cash or they throw cash through the envelope. They write them a check. Like basically, he doesn't interact with them because he has this implicit trust with well, with a lot of his customers that like, what it needs, it's going to get. Right. And
Yeah.
that, you don't take it to him unless you're ready to have everything that it needs done. Or like, a certain customer, his one customer, I don't know, the one, I don't want to say his name on the podcast, but like, this dude owns, I think like a dozen Plymouths, like 1967 Plymouth Super Bs and shit like that. Like the shit that people would die for, that would spend, his portfolio is probably worth like $12 million in like these old 60s Plymouths. And with a customer like him, it would be like, oh yeah, the last time he came in, my dad ordered him tires and everything, and then he drops his car off, and then he does everything to it. Basically, the whole point here is that my dad sincerely gives a fuck about giving the customers a good car experience,
Right.
right? And that's what separates things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's good quality. They know they're going to get what they pay for, if not more than what they pay
Exactly.
for.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that shit I think matters. Where like, you see that in your kid, and hopefully, I hope my daughter wants to play sports when she gets older. Not necessarily because like, oh, she has to, but because like that builds a network, that builds, friendships, that builds a lot for you as a person. And, when you mention your son Talon, half-assing it. It's like, oh no, I know you could do better. And like you said, in that moment, it's probably like you could have sat him down and said, like, hey, why didn't you run for that? Like, is everything okay? But I think, probably like we were saying earlier, in a subtle moment, it just wasn't the right thing at the right time, and you yelled at him. And then, like you said, you regretted it. Whereas you probably could have went up and said, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Is there something that I could do to make you give a shit about what you're doing right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, I used to listen to sports radio. And so the thing is a big deal making fun of the, over competitive parents, like, and
Yeah.
so, and when I found myself in that situation, I was like, well,
God damn it.
got me.
Yeah, am I the dude
But
with the cup holder right now? He's screaming at his kid to run to first base when it really
uh,
doesn't matter.
yeah, exactly. But also I mean, so I mean, I think that some kids like to compete. When I was young, I love to compete, but I think some
Yeah,
kids don't really care if they compete. You know, some kids just want to be, in your presence doing things that with you that you enjoy and they enjoy. And
yeah,
so it's like at some point you have to let your kid be a kid, you know? And so many of these parents have structured their children's lives
yeah.
to where, well, you play soccer from this month to this month, and when soccer's over, then you're in this, you run track, and then when track's over, you play basketball, and then when basketball's over, you play soccer. When soccer's over, you run in track. When track's over, you're playing basketball. And it's like, when does that kid ever have a chance to just be a kid? And
Right.
and so when they're out there on the field or on the court or whatever, goofing off with their friends and not paying attention to the game, well, they never have an opportunity to just goof off. You got to let a
Right.
kid be a kid. I mean, you really
Mhm.
do. And so I don't know. I couldn't sit here and say, yeah, well, the best time to start entering children into competition is this age. But I do think there is a period of time to where you you want your kids to just be able to compete. I mean, to
Mhm.
be kids, and then there's a time to enter that child into competition. The problem
Mhm.
is that, let's say, like, if you start your kid out at t-ball at 5 years old, and then they go at 7 years old and they start, um, I think that's when they start the pitching. It's like coach pitch, and then they work through that coach pitch area until they're like 10 years old, and then it's the other kids are pitching, et cetera, and
Yeah.
they build up. There's a linear path. So if you don't enter them into t-ball at 5 years old, then and you try to put them directly into coach pitch, well, you better have been working with them on that in the background, because if
Mhm.
they're way behind, they're never going to get any playing time. You know.
Mhm.
Now my son Ian, he didn't. Oh yeah, he did. He played t-ball. Never mind. Never mind. I was thinking about something else. But but he ended up being really good at baseball, and if he would have stuck with it, I think he could have done something with it. Like my buddy's son, Damon, who did
Mhm.
not play t-ball, which is who I was thinking of.
Oh.
Uh, he ended up getting a scholarship to a
Mhm.
college, to a university, and a top level university, not some like junior college. He got a scholarship to a top level university, for through baseball, because he was good. And but that was something he had to catch up with all the other kids when he started playing.
Mhm. Yeah. It's kind of like if you were to hand somebody a guitar and tell them to play, I don't know, like a Zach Wild or a Dimebag solo, like as soon as you hand it to them, versus like, oh no, let's learn how to play Smoke on the Water. Like you got to kind of walk someone through something like that. You
Yeah,
can't just expect them to be top level at whatever they do without a little bit.
right, right. It's like okay, EADGBE. Now play Dream Theater. Oh, we lost sound
Good luck.
again. Oh,
Oh
there we
no.
go. There we go. There we
Yeah.
go. There we go.
Oh
It was
no,
just
it's
for a
like
second.
yeah, it's like yeah, EADGBE. All right, now play Dream Theater. Oh, by the way, there's flats in there. Good luck.
Right.
Like no, you'll never
The
figure that shit out.
motherfucker's like, what? Wait, what? What's a flat? Oh yeah, he's
Yeah.
playing. You have a six string. He's playing a seven string. Don't worry about it. You don't need it.
Yeah, you don't need that seventh string. It's
Yeah,
only
don't
five
worry.
more notes. You'll be all right.
Yeah, yeah, you'll be all right. You'll be all
One
right.
thing that I enjoyed, and I know I've mentioned it a million times on your show, unfortunately, and my show, but like the whole teaching thing, I was so excited for that because I felt like I could be a good teacher. And like, I gave the same lesson when I was interviewing for it. Um, I gave a lesson on like how to diagnose a light bulb, if I remember correctly. So like a bulb was out on a vehicle, and then I walked through like checking power and ground, and then checking the wires end to end, and also like replacing the light with another light to verify that like that circuit could do work.
Hmm.
And I taught that to Sarah, and she she was like, "I know you actually did really good." She's like, "I actually kind of understand how that circuit works now." And even when I did the whole thing in front of the people that were interviewing me, they said that like I did really good, but they're like, you'd be surprised at like how slow these kids have to learn. And then this past weekend, this cab right here, right? I got one that I play out with that I built pretty much myself. I bought
Hmm.
another cab and then I put speakers in it and then changed out the wiring and everything. And
Yeah, I remember when
Sarah and
you
I,
got it working for the first time. We realized you
yeah,
weren't completely useless.
yeah, exactly. So we went out to Youngstown, and this kind of fucked me off, but like we played a show at a place called the West Side Bowl Thursday night, and it was a pretty cool venue. So they have like a bowling alley upstairs and a stage to the right of there, and it's like a pretty a nice size stage, pretty cool design and everything, like a little area where people could stand or sit. And then there's like an arcade, there's two bars up there, and there's pinball machines and stuff. And you go downstairs, and they have all these t-shirts all over like the walls, on the roof, and everything that are wrapped around like a little thing of cardboard. So you could see like the main design of the shirt. It's
Hmm.
so fucking cool. And then there's a stage down there as well. So they have two stages, and there's also a bar downstairs. So this venue is just really, really fucking cool. Um, and I was supposed to pick up speakers off a guy while I was out there Thursday night. And he's like, "Oh, my wife has a headache. I can't leave." And I'm like, "Dude, will I come to your house to get these speakers?" Because it's not like it's super far. It's about an hour and 45 minutes from my house, but he didn't
Yeah.
leave. So Sarah and I had to go out there Saturday to go get him. And I was like, "Oh, like I really don't want to make this drive twice." So, but anyways, like we got him, and I told him like I want you to help me put these speakers in. And I don't know, we had like a little bit of fun with it. And um, so to replace the speakers, you just take out the screws, take off the grill, take off the backing,
Hmm.
remove the speaker, put the wires on, and then you have to check the resistance to make sure that like it's not too low or too high,
Hmm.
because all amps or cabinets are generally wired either 8 or 16 ohms. So I had to make sure that it was like right around there. Like before I replaced these speakers, it was 10 ohms, which is fine. It's supposed to be 8, but like, obviously everything is gonna have a little bit of different resistance over time because the contacts wear out or whatever. And when I was done with it, it was 17 and a half ohms. So I was like, all right, no, it's still good because that's right around like 16 ohms. And like if it's higher than the resistance on the head, then it's okay. So like that's my new head laying right there. My MT100, which is just a fucking beast. So yeah, it was just fun. And I showed her like the resistance and everything. So um I don't know where exactly I was going with that, but I don't know. I just enjoy teaching people about stuff, specifically shit like that. So hopefully, whenever my daughter gets here and if she takes an interest in anything that I know about, then, hopefully I can teach that in a way that she'll understand and can, use.
Yeah. Yeah, and she will. And that'll all come in time. You know, there's you can at the moment, if you can, you know, just lay your head on, Sarah's stomach and just talk to her right now, man. And like, you won't believe the experience like you have whenever she hears you talk for the first time. It's like, cause she'll
Yeah.
just be like, oh yeah, I know that voice, like I know who
Mhm.
that is, And so, yeah, all those things will come. You'll be great at it. And there's going to be learning curves and you're going to be like, I don't know what to do about this. And you'll figure it out. It's just,
Nah.
nobody's given a guidebook on how to deal with a child for the first time, but after you have the first one and she'll get like a year, 2 years old, then y'all probably want another one, and
Yeah.
you'll have kind of some idea as to how to navigate those waters. But part of the excitement is not knowing, and
Mhm.
that learning curve, and that you know but just you make a deal with Sarah, like these are our boundaries, this is how we're going to do this. If if it comes to, like, you made a point earlier about how, go ask your mother. Well, my mother told me to come ask you. Well, if this situation like that happens, go talk to Sarah and be like, okay, what are we thinking here? What are the pros? What are the cons? Like, should we not? You know, and then, you can work it out from there. But if you already have a way, if you've already have like kind of like the outline, the blueprint for communication on raising the child, on, the basics laid out between the two of y'all, y'all are both on the same page, you're both operating within the same rule book, so to speak, you shouldn't have any issues. You know,
Yeah.
like a lot of times, like kids are going to try to turn their parents against each other. So
Mm.
if your daughter goes and asks mom for a piece of candy and mom says no, and then she's like, well, I know my dad will give it to me because my dad gives me everything, and she
Yeah.
comes ask you, said, Daddy, can I please have a piece of candy? And you're like, sure, baby. And then she's eating that piece of candy, and Sarah's like, why are you eating candy? I told you no. And you're like, oh shit, I told her yes. Like
Yeah.
kids are gonna do those types of things. But if you have but then you learn from that, you're like, okay, well, here comes Riley running up into my room saying, Daddy, Daddy, can I have a piece of candy? And now I know to ask, what did your mom say? You know?
Mm.
And and most of the time they'll tell you, no. Well, if mom said no, and then like how to operate through, you start working your way through those little mazes.
Mm.
Typically the child's not going to be like, oh, I didn't ask mom. I just came and asked you because in my mind, I know mom will say no, and I know you'll say yes. So
Yeah.
screw mom. Why ask her? You know, and so
Yeah.
so, you know, sometimes you're going to have to defer to Sarah, and you're going to like, Riley's going to come ask you something. And you're going to be like,
Mm.
Sarah, can Riley have a piece of candy? And Sarah's going to be like, no, I told her no. And y'all have to defer back and forth, and y'all work
Mm.
all that stuff out. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's an opportunity for y'all to get closer in a manner of being a team together, and also raise this little miniature Matovcik, and have a good time doing it.
Yeah. So it finally came back to me what I was thinking about earlier. And it's I think a sign of maturity, and maybe this is just me kind of spitballing and patting myself on the back, is kind of realizing a couple things. So like I think about my ex-girlfriend when I was in college and thinking about how, well, first of all, I should have broke up with her sooner because like there were signs and something told me I should have, and I didn't. And I look back at that and I realize, okay, she was a good person and she deserves somebody that would have given her, their full undivided attention and all the love and time that she deserves that I couldn't give her. And also looking at your parents and realizing that, like, even though your childhood may not have been ideal, that you kind of realize that they're imperfect people, much like you and I, and that they were doing the best that they thought they could do with what they had, no matter what, and realizing that, like, it's not worth holding a grudge over. Like, to
Mm,
me, that sounds like a something that you come into as you get older, because that's
mm,
definitely where I'm at in in respect to my parents. And I came to that realization a long time ago, but like, I think about that quite a bit because now obviously my parents and I are getting closer again because now they have a grandchild. It's their first grandchild. And you know i I wasn't sure how my dad would take it. I knew how my mom was going to take it, and it's gone as predictable as I thought it would. But my
mm.
dad is he's excited without telling me that he's excited.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And it's for men, it's just like, okay. And then once that relationship starts building, then that
Mm,
makes all the difference in the world. And so
yeah.
once she gets here and your dad spends some time with her, and she's going to want to go over and see, Pop or whatever the hell you're going to call your dad. And they're going to build that relationship, and just as much as she's going to have you wrapped around her little finger, she's going to have him wrapped around her little finger too.
Mm,
The funniest thing is like when we're at my parents' house, and my daughter will come over with my granddaughter, and my granddaughter runs straight to my dad. It's like because she loves her great grandpa, and her great grandpa, he's just a big softy, and it's like,
All
and
six,
she
four of
knows
them.
it. Yeah, and she knows it. She knows she's going to get whatever she wants if she goes right up to, her great grandpa. So it just is what it is, man. And those relationships build, and
Mm,
all that stuff works out, you know, that you just it's like it's almost like getting married though. You kind of have to have the parameters set, the blueprint kind of drawn out. We understand what our limits are, what we're trying to work forward for, what we want out of life, and we both want the same things. We're dreaming together, we're planning together, we're building a life together, and it's not two independent people doing two independent things that just happen
yeah.
to cohabitate, because that stuff never works out.
Yeah.
It's the togetherness, that building a community, that building a family, you know, uh, being a rock, and kind of being able to depend on the other person, that other person being able to depend on you. Not every day's
Mm,
perfect, you know this as well as I do, but that's just like parenting. It's the same thing.
mm,
You're just adding a third party into what you and Sarah have already built up to this point, and
yeah.
now you have the opportunity to share it with another person, and
Mm,
and show them how good life can be. And
mm,
it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be sacrifices. You're going to teach your daughter about sacrifice. You're going to teach your daughter about pain. You're going to, and all those things are going to come naturally, and you're not going to have an issue with it. I promise. You might not like it at all times. Not everything's going to be hunky dory, but
yeah.
that's life, man. And you're going to get through it, and you're going to love it, and you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to be a good father, man. And Sarah's going to be a
Thanks,
great
man.
mother.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I had a pretty lengthy phone call with my dad, and it was after he helped me put in my stove because that's kind of he says he always enjoys doing shit like that, and I get it because like we get to spend time together, and I do love spending time with my dad because I didn't spend a lot of time with him growing up now, and he in so many words had basically said that like he doesn't want to be like his dad, even though, like obviously my grandfather loved my older brother and I, and he realized the situation that we were in compared to, my younger siblings. And it's not like a dig on anybody in this situation, but there's just differences here. And I remember my dad told me, he's like, I never knew if your grandfather was proud of me. He's like, there were just, it was a tough life for us too. And when we were on the phone, I just wanted to make sure that he knew. I'm like, I want you to be a part of your granddaughter's life. Like
Mhm.
I knew the relationship that I had with my grandfather, and like I tell people this all the fucking time because how much I regret it. It's just like I would give anything for my grandfather to see me now because I mean, once again, he was a second generation auto mechanic. My dad's a third, I'm the fourth. I would love, I would give everything in the world. And my brother and I just went to this restaurant, but Thursday morning we went to a restaurant called Master's. It's been there since 1923 or 1928, right? My grandfather used to take us there when I was a kid, and I hated it. And then eventually I got older and I loved it, right? What I wouldn't give for just one morning to sit down with my grandfather today, right?
Mm,
And just talk to him about everything that's going on.
mm,
And, for him to see me where I am now, I have an idea of how he would feel, but I would love to just have the conversation with him. I'll never get to do that. And when he died, I was 15 years old. So, yeah, about half my life ago, 15 years ago, I couldn't wait to leave his funeral. And I think about that pretty frequently. And I'm like, what I wouldn't give to have just been there for a little bit longer and talk to people who were there. Because I mean, there were people lined up out around the building, around the block to see my grandfather on his deathbed. And I couldn't wait to leave like the little fucking asshole that I was. So when I talk to people about, death and dealing with that, I'm like, just if they meant something to you, spend every single second you can at the funeral and talk to people who knew them because like I'll never get that opportunity. And now looking back at it, that would have been the coolest thing in the world. And I don't want my children to feel that way about their grandfather because like I look at my dad and I'm sure every kid, every son feels this way about their fathers that like their father is a great man, not every, but a lot of kids probably feel they look up to their dad like how can I live in his shadow? And that's the way that I feel very, very often. And, I hope that, my my daughter and, maybe my future son feels that way about their grandfathers, that he was a great man, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I look, I think about like my, specifically my two grandfathers, um,
Hmm.
and the relationship that I had with them. And, I think about like my dad's dad, Grandpa Ralph. People always said, "Oh, he's just such a crotchety old bastard. He's just a mean son of a bitch." And he
Yeah.
was, but I got along with him great. He was funny, you know. He was funny. He was not the type that was quick to compliment or give you a pat on the back, but he
Yeah.
expected you he expected a lot out of the people out of his family. It is
Yeah.
basically the way, because he knew but he never expected more than you could give him.
Mm.
It was always within your ability to give or to accomplish what he was expecting out of you. And
Mm.
you know that's I mean the mindsets of that generation compared to where we are today. Yeah, he would never be accepted in today's society. Like, yeah, he's just it just wasn't his. He just wouldn't have fit. It's way too soft for men like that nowadays,
Yeah.
you know. But his him being so hard on people and having such high expectations of his family members was his way of showing you that he cared about you because he trusted you to be that good.
It was the opposite of the soft bigotry of low expectations,
Right.
right? That whole
Yeah.
George W. Bush thing of, once again, the soft bigotry of low expectations. He knew you could do better, so he expected better out of you. And
Right.
I think that is a very, very interesting way of, to be honest, loving somebody. And it's kind of like when I talk about my work experience, I always tell people that, like, man, I wish a lot of people had to go through what I went through when I was making minimum wage here in Pennsylvania, 7.25 an hour, working for a dealership, changing oil and getting my teeth kicked in, day out. And like, at the time, I thought those guys were the meanest old bastards I ever fucking knew in my entire life. But I'll tell you what, I would give them the shirt off my back, and it taught me many, many good lessons
Yeah.
and gave me a hell of a work ethic. And like, in today's world, that's like not acceptable. I mean, back then it wasn't acceptable, but I wasn't a little bitch.
Yeah.
I took it, I understood my place, and that, made me into the person that I am today. And I'm grateful for it. Every time I get the chance, I always, say my thanks for that, because once again, that really shaped who I am to this day. And same deal, I always tell people about my first experience doing a tune-up in a van outside on 100% humidity, 100-degree day, fucking taking a dog box out in the parking lot of my dad's shop. Like, that shit built character. It may not sound that good at the time, but you kind of look back at it, and then you look at where you were to where you are now, and you realize that you're not a cunt because of it. I mean, it's the truth, though.
Right. Well, I mean, my mom raised me, you don't, she would always tell me, she goes, if you want to sit in the corner and suck your thumb and wallow around in your own piss and vinegar, then you have at it. You can do that on your own. If you want my help, I'm here to help you, but I'm not getting down in the mud with you. I'm not doing that, you
Yeah.
know? And so that teaches you to stand up, like to get up, stop feeling sorry for yourself and move forward. That was the whole point. Just like, yeah, like life sucks, man. Shit happens. Now, what are you going to do about it? You know?
Hmm.
And that's that. And sometimes you got to be tough on people and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just the way it goes. And I've been like that with my kids, like when they call, like, just for an example, Aiden getting into an accident here a few months ago and totaling his car. He's like, well, this woman shouldn't have been blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I was like, yeah, dude, but you can't control that woman. I've been driving truck for 22 years. I've never been in an accident. Do you think
Oh,
I
yeah.
do you think I achieved that by accident? No. It's because I understand how to watch what's going on around me, predict what other people are going to do, and react before they do it. You
Hmm.
know, I don't put myself in a situation to get in that position. I'm not saying the accident was your fault. I'm saying now, what can you change about your habits in order to avoid it happening again? And if
Hmm.
you're just going to point the finger at the other woman and you're not willing to change anything, it will happen again,
Right.
you know? So
Yeah.
sometimes you do have to be a little rough with kids, like in family. I mean, you know this. Like nobody has to tell you these things. You got to be tough with your friends. You got to be tough with your kids. It's just the way it is, man. Just because somebody says, "Hey, dude, you're fucking up," doesn't mean they don't like you. It
Yeah.
probably means they like you. You know, like somebody that hates you isn't going to like try to get you to not fuck up. They're just going to be like, whatever. I don't
Hmm.
give a shit about that person.
Yeah, not my problem at that point. Yeah. Like I said, I'm thankful that we have a lot of good people around us. And, I always think of the saying, a ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And like you said, don't put yourself in those kind of situations because I'm thinking about future situations with my daughter, and it's like, well, how do you stop the most heinous things imaginable happening? And it's just making sure they're not in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, there's things that could be completely out of their control that could still happen and be awful, but, it's also your head on a swivel at all times. Know your surroundings. And, if something doesn't seem right, then bounce, go,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
it's one of those
yeah,
situations. I remember a while back there was this whole argument about like victim blaming and stuff like that. And they were talking about there was
yeah,
this story about this girl who got raped and she was out late at night, like 2 in the morning, and she was by herself or something like that. And
yeah,
this dude, like, he savagely abused her and raped her and it's like, okay, but I'm not saying that the guy isn't at fault, and I'm not saying it's the girl's fault, but this
yeah,
is a perfect reason why you should teach your daughters not to be in a situation like that.
exactly. Don't,
It's
and
not
what it's not
like
condoning it. Yeah.
don't allow yourself to be in that situation. I'm not saying it's that girl's fault. I'm saying you want to teach a woman not to be in that situation, whether if she's got to be out at 2 o'clock in the morning walking the street for whatever reason, then
Yeah.
have a man with her that she knows, or another girl or a couple of girls or whatever it takes to not be in that situation. You know,
Yeah.
like you can be a victim, not be to blame, and still not have made the best decisions.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's what it's all about.
It's like when people talk about people unfortunately getting raped, right? Like let's say at a party or something like that, it's like, okay, well, I'm not saying this is never condoning said actions, but it's like if you go to a party and you start drinking and you can no longer operate like you would when you were stone cold sober, it's not entirely your fault, but you do share some of this blame for putting yourself into that situation. Once again, it's not condoning what happens to this hypothetical person, but you also kind of have to be aware like, hey, I'm going somewhere where, if I get drunk, then something could happen. Once again, that's not saying anything should happen, but once again, you are now changing your risk profile overall of something like
Right.
that happening to you. And the best way to not have that happen, don't put yourself in that situation. All right. Like,
Where's your battle buddy?
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
like if you are going out and you're like, all right, I'm just letting you know, I'm getting 3 sheets tonight. Then I want somebody having my back.
Yeah.
Somebody watch my six. Like it's kind of, because I get a little out of control. So just kind of
Mhm.
keep me on a leash. So and and so that's the responsible thing to do. I mean, that's
Mhm.
what responsible people do, right?
Yeah.
I'm not drinking tonight because I'm the designated driver. Like
Mhm.
remember those commercials. Like that's because that's the responsible thing to do. You
Mhm.
know, I'm drinking less than them tonight because I'm the designated drunk driver. That is not so responsible. I'm just saying.
I mean,
That
I
was
think we've all been
that
there
was
though.
all that was my mentality throughout most of my life, but it was not responsible.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You
mean,
know?
yeah, I've definitely done it before. I think one of the most disappointing things for me was I got drunk when we were playing Rock for Life, and that's like my favorite show every year. And I always hype it up so much. I'm like, this year's gonna be fucking awesome too. Like, I'm super excited for this year's Rock for Life. And like, I got piss drunk. Like, I still played okay, but like I was fucking trashed. And my drummer gave me a talking to afterwards. And like the biggest thing was that he knows that I know that I shouldn't do that. And he knows that I know that he knows I should do better. And I didn't. I didn't. The fucking whole bottle of Jameson gone, 9 White Claws gone, and there I am up on
Oh,
stage. And
Jesus.
oh, dude, it was bad. Like Sarah
Ugh.
showed me some videos. I'm like, fuck, I actually played better than I thought. But still, like, I just
Yeah.
no. So
Yeah. No
yeah,
doubt.
fuck.
All right, man, plug away. We
Yeah,
didn't
man.
talk
Well,
we didn't talk about anything we had planned on talking about.
I was just thinking about that. I'm like, it's been like an hour and a half, and we touched on nothing you texted me about. Yeah. Hey, man.
That's
Either way.
okay.
Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed the conversation either way. But yeah, Common Crown, depending on when you're airing this, in 9 days, we're playing with Lacey Sturm at the Raindrop Inn. That's gonna be March 21st. And then the day after that, we're gonna be out in Ebensburg, playing with Hate Grenade. Both those shows are gonna be really, really cool. And you'll see some familiar faces on Tommy's show if you come to the show in Ebensburg. So hopefully you can come hang out there. I don't remember. I think the next show after that is April 19th at the Forge with our buddies in Skell. And then on the podcast, I got Jose Nino coming on next week, and that's going to be March 19th. And tomorrow I'm having on Dave Green from Dave the Distributist. If you're familiar with any of his writing, he's done a ton of debates. Really looking forward to doing that. And then Janine Yunez on March 23rd, who's a civil liberties attorney. We're going to be talking about anti-BDS legislation and speech legislation. And of course, Tommy's been a guest on there before, but 5 till midnight and commoncrown.com, Matovcik on Twitter, all that good stuff, man. And as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you, man.
Cool, man. I'm gonna stop the recording.